Hello everyone. Welcome to Straight from Heart Conversation. My name is Himanshu Saxena. I am the founder and CEO of Centro Strategic Mindset. My mission is to groom strategic minds who can deliver bold business impact. In my current role, I'm a thinker, writer, speaker, and coach. Straight from Heart Conversations are authentic conversations from thinkers, philosophers, gurus. These are leaders in their world. They have traveled a journey which is quite inspirational and provides meaningful triggers for others to emulate and follow. So, who's our guest today for Straight from Heart Conversation? Our guest today is one of the 50 leading business thinkers in the world. She has done some amazing work in disrupt yourself and personal disruption, has compiled her work in a critically acclaimed work which is Disrupt Yourself, and is currently championing the work of creating the A team, which is really the sought after buzzword in organizations, especially in financials and technology companies. In addition to this, she's also one of the Marshall Goldsmith 100 coaches and original cohort of 25 coaches. A couple of things which stand out is she's the innovation and disruption theorist, keynote speaker, best-selling author, executive and performance coach. Whitney, she's our guest today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Have I missed any credentials?
I think that's enough.
Okay.
I'm a wife and mother. How about that?
Yes, I was going to cover that. How do you manage? But now you brought the topic. Let me begin with the question, being a wife and a mother and doing so much, how do you manage this?
I have an amazing husband. So I think, if you were to think that I did everything on my own and my husband was sort of out there not doing anything and I was doing children and I was doing work, then I would be pretty amazing. But I don't do it like that. I have a wonderful husband. Our children are actually a little bit older. We have a son who's in college, a daughter who's in high school, and he is an academic, and so he's able to be at home and kind of make sure that things that matter happen. So, for example, my daughter's getting ready to go do college visits. My husband's going to go with her because I'm on the road. And so I would say I manage by having a great partner that we are able to work together and balance things out.
I think you put a very strong ecosystem for each one to flourish.
Yeah.
I think the book which Marshall and Sally are pioneering, How Women Rise, one of the things is for women to have a strong system, and that's a perfect model I see. Thank you for sharing that. So is this your first visit to India and Mumbai?
It is my first visit to India and to Mumbai, but obviously first visit.
And did you get a chance to enjoy the Indian culinary experience and do some shopping?
I haven't done any shopping, but I have definitely gotten to enjoy the Indian food, and I am loving it. I love lamb, and so for lunch I just had a lamb mutton kind of stew and naan, and I'm in heaven right now.
And this place is quite good to
Yes.
prepare some of the best
Yes.
cuisines. All right, so let me begin this conversation with a very simple question. How did this journey from an equity analyst to an author, thinker, speaker, and coach begin?
So I was working in New York as an equity analyst, and it was around 2003, 2004, so about 13, 14 years ago now, and I came across a book called The Innovator's Dilemma
By Clayton Christensen.
by Clayton Christensen at the Harvard Business School. And what was interesting about this book is that it helped me as I read it. I was covering telecom at that point in time in the emerging markets and Latin America specifically. And every single quarter I would see that they were beating my estimates. So I was covering America Mobile, it was wireless, and they were beating my estimates over and over and over again. And I was being aggressive. So I'm like, why is this happening? And so then I read the book, The Innovator's Dilemma, and then I understood that the wireless was a low-end disruptor in that market, and it was beating out the wireline telco, and it was basically disrupting wireline telephony. And so as I read that book, that explained, what was happening in my professional life. But I was then having this experience where I had felt like I was at the top of my game. I had gone to one of the senior members of management and said, I'd really like to see if I could move into a management track at some point. And he was pretty dismissive. It's like, well, that's nice, but we kind of like you right where you are. And as I reflected on that, I had this start of an epiphany, which was, if I really want to accomplish some things that I want to accomplish in life, I need to also be a disruptor. That this whole framework that I was applying to products and services actually might apply to me as an individual. And so it was a kernel of an idea, but that's how that journey began, is just reading that book, realizing it applied to equity research, and now maybe it also applied to me as a person. And so within a year, I actually disrupted myself and left equity research and became an entrepreneur.
I think that's the best way to stay relevant. And I often feel that somewhere in your life, someone has to come and be dismissive about your idea. That's where the epiphany begins. And I'm reminded of a conversation that happened between Jeff Bezos and his boss when he was reading a message that web usage is growing 2,300%, and he said, I want to leave. And his boss was absolutely dismissive about his idea that, are you a fool to do that? And see where he's gone to create a business. So somewhere in life, we need to have someone who's dismissive about our thoughts. Thank you for sharing that. I see that your early education was in music and English. So where did this departure from music to Merrill Lynch happen?
So, yeah, I studied music. I started playing piano when I was fairly young. I was around 6 or 7, which in some markets isn't that young. But by the time I was 7, I'd persuaded my mother to let me take piano. And so I'd studied music. And one of the things that was interesting for me is that at some point, because I was quite good, and this sometimes happens with parents and they don't mean to, my dream of playing the piano became my mother's dream. And so it wasn't my dream anymore. And I studied music in high school, and then I studied it in college because I was still young and I was willing to fulfill my mother's dream. But some interesting things happened, which is I got married and I graduated from college, and then we moved to New York, and I wasn't going to do music. And I also knew that I had to put food on the table because my husband was in school. He was studying for his PhD in microbiology. And so the combination of me realizing that music wasn't actually my dream, us needing to put food on the table, and being in New York in the late 80s.
Yeah.
This was an exciting time to be in New York. It was
Things were just beginning to happen.
It was the era of Liar's Poker and Bonfire of the Vanities and Working Girl. I don't know if you know these movies, but you probably know Liar's Poker. And I was like, Wall Street is so exciting. And so I start working on Wall Street, but because I'm a female, because I'm a music major, and because it's the late 80s, I started as a secretary. I would go to work every day, and I would sit in this bullpen, or actually sit at the desk, because I was a secretary, and this bullpen was right next to me of all these young guys, because they were all men, who were saying, you need to open up this account, and, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that this is a great stock, and throw down your pom-poms and get in the game. And initially I was super offended because I was a cheerleader in high school. But then I started thinking, I need to throw down my own pom-poms and get in my game, because I'm sitting on the sidelines over here and I need to do this. And so it was the combination of being married, actually, which grounded me in a really unusual way. I think sometimes we think that marriage traps women, but it grounded me. And then being in New York, the right place, the right time, my ambition probably coming to the fore, and I was like, okay, I want to work on Wall Street. And so that was the beginning of being a secretary, but then eventually going to school and having the opportunity to move on to the professional track as an investment banker. So that was the start.
And without the studies of finance?
I had no finance. I did take business courses at night. I started taking accounting. I took finance. So the combination of that and then working on learning on the job.
Which is quite counterintuitive.
It is.
Did it help in making the right calls in investment, not being from finance?
It's a good question. I think there is some... Yes, because if you think about it, as a stock picker, you've got to build your financial models, and you've got to have projections of what you think is going to happen with a company. But I believe that actually stocks have a personality.
They have emotions.
They have emotions. I mean,
Yeah.
there's once a stock has momentum, then that momentum builds. And so while people will tell you all the day long that they're making investment decisions purely based on the numbers, I believe that in many instances people have a gut sense about what they think it's going to do, and then they do the numbers to be able to support what they think it's going to do. And so my background, I think as a musician, I'm a great accompanist on the piano when people are singing. I have a sense of how to see momentum, and being a stock picker, a good stock picker, is the ability to spot momentum.
That's quite a journey from secretary to where you are today. Hats off to you. When you spoke about disruption and you talked about when you were at the top of your game, I think so often it happens when you're at the top of the game, that's where you need to just leave everything and start the journey absolutely in a different turf and territory. And that's what makes us grow as a human being for a long, long time. I see a strong resonance, and in my own career, I have changed 5 careers. I started as a geologist, worked in the military, worked in UN in Congo and Africa, then worked in Tata's in consulting, and now as a coach. 6 different careers. I couldn't have been richer if I had not traversed this journey.
That's a great story of personal disruption.
And when you speak about Clayton, he himself is an epitome of disruption. Right at 50, he decided to leave every flourishing business and get into academics and
Yeah,
be in the field of research.
exactly.
Great. So, Whitney, your latest book, Building a Team, is a highly fancied phrase and a sought after buzzword in some of the top companies, especially financial world. In fact, in one of my clients, Edelweiss, someone you're going to meet today, there's a lot of focus on building, they call it A-raters team, which is similar to A teams. So tell us about the genesis of this title and writing of this book.
So let me back up for just a second to talk you through where this book came from. I had this big aha when I was working with Clayton Christensen. So after I left Wall Street, I started working with him and had this big aha. Well, actually, the continuation of the aha that it's not. The disruption isn't just about products and services, it's also about people. And so over the last 5 years, I've been researching and codifying this and wrote a book called Disrupt Yourself that puts forth this framework of personal disruption, a 7-point framework that tells you, okay, how do you know when it's time to make a change? And here's a framework to make that change successfully. So over the last 2.5 years, as I've been going around the world and talking to companies and consulting and coaching, I had people say to me, well, okay, I get it. I got it. I understand I want to disrupt myself, but how do I get my boss to let me disrupt myself? And how do I get my team to disrupt themselves? And sometimes there was the unspoken and sometimes spoken, well, I'm not going to let you talk to my company because if you do, then people are going to leave because they're going to disrupt themselves and leave.
Yeah.
And so I believed, and I started with this hypothesis that that's actually not true, that if in fact you want to be an innovative organization, if you want to be an organization that can manage through change, you will make it possible for your people to disrupt themselves inside of your organization.
Yes.
And so that book came out of that, wanting to answer that question, how do you create the ecosystem wherein disruption is possible, and how do you create an ecosystem wherein your organization is more able to manage through change?
Yeah. And one of the things which I've experienced that often expertise come in the way of disrupting. So if I have to draw a circle and I say that expertise is narrow,
Okay.
and then I draw another bigger circle that common sense is much bigger, where do you think we should operate? You have a vast circle of common sense, expertise is so narrow. So every time you feel that you're an expert, I think that's the time to disrupt.
Yes, agreed.
So tell us, according to you, what really constitutes an A team? What are the characteristics of an A team?
So the way I'm defining it in this book is that every single person in your organization is a learning machine. Every single person is a learning machine. We want the opportunity to not know how to do something, to learn how to do it, and then master it. And more to the point, or to give you a better visual, every single person is on a learning curve. So when you start a new role, when you start a new job, you're at the bottom of the curve where you're inexperienced, you don't quite know what you're doing, you've got this jumble of pieces you're trying to put together, and that can mean that you're inexperienced and you get discouraged some days, but it also means you ask lots of questions like, why do we do it like this? And then after 6 months to a year, you move into the sweet spot of that curve, that steep part of the S. And this is the part where you're increasingly competent, you know what you're doing, things are hard, but not too hard, and they're easy, but not too easy, and you feel increasingly competent. And then, as you approach the top of the curve, things are easy, but because you're no longer learning, you're not getting those dopamine hits of, I figured something new out today, you get bored. You need all different parts of those curves in your organization. You need people in the sweet spot, you need people at the low end who are asking, why do we do this? In the sweet spot, how can we innovate if you give them stretch assignments at the high end to give you something to bump up against and to kind of have a perspective. Well, the way you build an A team is, which is a team who can innovate and manage through change, is by optimizing those curves. So at any given time, you want to have 70% of your people in the sweet spot where you're pushing them, stretching them, they're innovating. You want 15% of your people at the low end who are asking those questions like, why do we do this? And 15% of your people at the high end who are helpful, but you can't leave them there too long, because if you do, your plateau will become a precipice. And so what I think is important and important for companies to know is, if things have been going well and you're wondering, I wonder if we're about to be disrupted, I wonder if we're at risk, all you have to do is take the pulse of your workforce. Because if you have too many people at the high end, like more than 15, if you've got 20 or 30, what happens? People are bored. And when you're bored, you get complacent or you leave. And bored and complacent people don't innovate, they get disrupted. So that's how you build an A team, is you understand everybody's on a learning curve, and then you optimize those curves with 15, 70, and 15.
15?
70 and 15.
Okay. How A team is different from alpha male or the counterpart, the alpha female?
Say more about that. What are you asking me exactly?
So there's a lot of successful people, high expert, they're known by the term alpha male.
Right.
Drive, expertise, everything. And I've seen some of these A-raters flipping and slipping to that alpha male.
Yep.
And that's where the ego sets in and the downfall begins. So how do we arrest that our A-raters do not become?
Okay, got it. All right, so what I would say about that is, if you look at the 7-point framework of personal disruption, the fourth element of that, so the first element is take the right kinds of risks.
Would you like to share those 7 points to the
Sure,
audience?
absolutely, yeah. Okay, so it's a 7-point framework. The first one is to take the right kinds of risks. We tend to want to take on competitive risk, where we look at a market or we look at a job and we say, I can see that market, I've got the projections, or I can see that there's a job posting on LinkedIn, I'm going to go after that. That's competitive risk. So you know there's an opportunity, but there's also competition. You instead want to take on market risk. You play where no one else is playing. It looks like it's scarier, less certain, but in fact it's less risky. So that's number one, take the right risks. Number two, play to your distinctive strengths. Not only what you do well, but what you do well that other people don't. And when you feel strong, you're more willing to play where other people aren't playing. 3 is to embrace your constraints. We think, if only I had enough time, money, expertise, everything would be fine. Oprah's my fairy godmother. It will all work. But in fact, the law of physics says you need constraints. You need friction in order to climb that curve. 4th is battle entitlement. I'll come back to that one in just a second, because this is the alpha male question you asked. 4th is a battle entitlement. So this is the idea of everything's working, revenue growth is accelerating, margins are expanding, your team's humming, I'm humming, and now you say, okay, well, right now, when everything's working, I actually have the cognitive, I have the emotional, I have the financial bandwidth to question things, to disrupt myself, to take a step back. But I don't want to, because everything's working. So this is the way things should or will and should always be. So that's battle entitlement. Come back to that. 5, step back to grow. personal disruption actually involves a willingness to step backwards, sideways, or down. And if you look at the math of it, in fact, I'll tell you the math really quickly. If you think about the slope of a line, when you disrupt yourself, you're going like this and your slope's like this. Disrupting yourself is you step back because the slope's going to be steeper. And that's where the disruption comes in.
Take pause, regroup, reorganize,
Right.
and get ready for the next battle.
Exactly. 6 is give failure its due. Recognize that the up and the down are part of personal disruption, that failure is a constraint, a tool of creation. And the number 7 is a willingness to be discovery-driven, to take a step forward, to gather feedback, and adapt. So, alpha male, battle entitlement. What happens is that when you are on that sweet spot of the curve, you feel like you deserve what you have. In fact, the more successful you are, the more you think you deserve your success.
Yeah.
And so when you get to that point and things are working, I think that's when the alpha male or female can kick in, and the ego is probably at its height. And it's the sneaky saboteur of any kind of innovation. And so what you want to do is be aware of it so you can check it and be willing to basically, in the words of Judith Glaser, she said, we're all addicted to being right. You've got to intervene and understand that you're addicted and actually be willing to listen to someone else's opinion.
Very interesting perspective that when we are on the path of success, we just take it that it is our effort which manifested.
We do.
We forget the entire ecosystem, the tailwind, that being at the right time, at the right place, with the right context. We just lose the sense of that.
All of a sudden, it's all us.
Yeah. We made it happen.
We made it happen.
Yeah. And the other thing which I like, the constraint part in life, and somebody wrote a book, I am not able to remember the author's name, Obstacle is the Way. I think it's Ryan Holiday or somebody.
It might be.
Yeah. So it's an obstacle is the way. And if you have to visualize, like how the water flows from the hills to the sea, there are lots of dikes, the banks, the sills, which guide the water to its journey. And so is life. If we don't have constraint, we just rot at some place.
We do.
Yeah.
We do.
Thanks. Very interesting perspective. So, basis your research and experience, I'm sure you would have spoken to many people, interviewed people. What's the recipe that has emerged from all that work of building the A team?
Well, one recipe, actually, you've interviewed him. It's Gary Ridge.
Gary Ridge, yes.
WD-40.
Yes.
So, very interesting. I'll tell you my take on what he's done. I mean, he can tell you his story, but it was really interesting to me because you look at this company and here it's not really all that exciting, right? They make this product that was invented 60 years ago, and
Nothing's exciting about it.
nothing's changed.
Yeah.
The label hasn't changed. There's nothing flashy. And then you find out that people they truly love to work at this company. Their engagement scores are 90% plus versus a global average
Tremendous.
of 15%. And so when I researched his company and I talked to Gary Ridge, the CEO, I was like, okay, what's happening here? Well, I find out that you've got 3 receptionists that are now senior people. One's a brand manager. We administer our diagnostic. We find 60% of their people believe they can achieve their career ambitions without ever leaving. And so my thesis going into this was, if you will allow your people to learn, if you will give them the opportunity to go where no one has gone before, in the words of Captain James T. Kirk of Star Trek, they will stay engaged. And what does WD-40 do? They allow their people, they develop their people through repeated personal disruptions. And then you look at their market cap, 2 decades, it's up 7 times from $250 million to $1.8 billion US dollars.
Aspirational, hugely amazing.
Hugely amazing. And then you go back, because you hear people say, well, I want to work for Google or I want to work for Facebook. Great. But the fact is that this is a company that on the face of it, it's not exciting, and yet people love to work there, and it's because they get to learn. And I think the message for any business leader is, as long as you let your people learn, it kind of doesn't matter what you make.
Yeah, and one thing which I liked from recall from the conversation with Gary is that this is not the place for everyone.
Uh-huh.
Very clear message that here is a set of values, culture that we have. If it fits in, welcome. If it doesn't, it's fine. It's okay.
Right.
So even that messaging is very key to have the right set of people in the place. If you don't have the right set of people, you can't develop them into a. Is that what? Okay. One of the things which working with creating the best team and best lot of people, I have a very simple tried, which I call it. You need to have ambition. If people don't have ambition, you can't make them grow.
Agreed.
Second, you need to have a developmental boss. Why developmental boss? Because if someone does not have the ambition, this developmental boss can stoke ambition. I remember in '95 when I was having a ball of my life in the military, the only thing which I was enjoying is the operation, bike, music, everything. I was getting all the courses, the Charlie grading, A, B, C. And then I happened to work under a boss, the colonel. He said, you have far more potential than you are manifesting. It is that one conversation which changed my trajectory. So that's the role of a developmental boss who can just fire you up. And third is the creating of developmental opportunities. So ambition, developmental boss, and developmental opportunities.
Completely agree. So did you have ambition before? Did you find, were you ambitious beforehand?
So initially back in 80s,
Yeah.
getting a job was the ambition.
Okay.
Okay, so I joined as a geologist, and then I saw two young captains dressed in smart olive green. I was fascinated. I said, I need to be there.
Yeah.
And trust me, I was physically not at all
Ready
equipped
to do the
to do that.
military.
But 18 months of training made a man out of me.
Yeah.
And then I landed there and I said, okay, life is good. There's nothing to worry, you have a ball. So at each stage, there's a plateau phase that comes in, and you need someone to fire you up, who
Yeah.
says that you have far more potential than you are actually doing that.
Yeah.
After that, I did not need. Then the self mechanism.
It started to kick in,
Yeah.
but someone saw something in you. It's interesting because I've realized that in the book Build an A Team, I have an a priori assumption or an underlying premise that the people are ambitious. And
They all.
yeah, I have that underlying premise that everybody's on a learning curve. And I think, but to your point, not everybody is, or we all are in a way, but not necessarily in the workforce. But there is that underlying premise that you are ambitious. And this book, again, is about creating that ecosystem of being the developmental manager that you just mentioned and giving people the developmental opportunity. And the way I describe it is learn, and then you leap, and then you repeat. So learn, leap, repeat.
Who played that role in your life?
You know, I have one person that really comes to mind for me is a boss that I had when I was at Merrill Lynch. Similar to yours in the sense that I was working as an equity analyst and I was good. But this boss, and I think I was always ambitious, but I didn't really believe that I could be really good. And he gave me some assignments, some stretch assignments, and he said, he just kind of saw me as a superstar. And it was the first time I'd had a boss that saw me as a superstar. And when he saw that in me, I thought maybe I could be. And so I agree. And you know what I love about this is that we hear stories about bad bosses, but there are a lot of good bosses in the world. A lot of really good ones. Like you just shared your story, I shared mine, I've had other ones.
Yeah.
But I think there are a lot of great bosses in the world.
And you know, those moments stay with you for the rest of the life.
They do.
We used to have a very prestigious competitive course which is called Defense Service Staff College. Very few make it. And my boss felt that I could do that. I put in my best effort, and I was the youngest to qualify. And this guy was on the phone talking to the headquarters, checking the list who all have made it. Obviously, my name was the 30th because I was the junior most. The moment he heard my name, he put the phone down. He said, "Bring the car. Let's go to Himanshu's house. Beer is to be ready. And we're going to open a champagne bottle."
Wow.
He just drove me from the military headquarters to my house, and told my wife, Poonam, we are coming. Put the champagne in the fridge.
Wow.
That's an amazing experience,
You'll
what a
never forget it.
developmental boss can do. So you're going to take a 2-minute pause and come back to this conversation after the break.
Okay.
Thank you.